Okay, thanks everyone for joining us today on this session on managing anxiety and leadership through restructuring and redundancy programmes. We've got with us today Rachael Brown, a Social Investment Scotland associate, and also Charley Gavigan from Brave Your Day. With this session, we've had some sessions earlier in the day from our legal advisors, Morton Fraser, and also from some restructuring advisors. Just to preface this webinar, we're not legal experts, we're not lawyers, so this section is going to be round about the human aspects of managing redundancy programmes and working with your teams. I'll start off with bringing in Rachael. Hi, Rachael.
Hello.
Hi there. Hi. So thank you so much for taking part and agreeing to be part of this workshop today. Really difficult topic for anyone that's had to go through or take people through a redundancy process. Knowing what you know before the people know in advance can induce a lot of anxiety. And prior to this, we've had some discussions about, you know, as a leader, how you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to act, how you're supposed to come across. And I just want to open up with a bit of an introduction to who you are and your experience, I guess, of running these sort of programs. And we'll take it from there.
Sure. Well, I'm delighted to be here. And I think it's really, it's actually a really positive step that we're having this conversation, because I think some of the really tough decisions, some of the tough scenarios that we're all going to be facing in the coming months, and if we're not already in them now, we seldom talk about them in such an open forum. And this is one of the brilliant things about our new look life online. You know, we can have access to all of these bits of information when and how we need them. So my experience is in the creative and cultural industries, along with social kind of thrown in there. For many years used the arts and cultural activities as a tool for social change. And I'm now in a very, I consider, privileged position of supporting businesses, engaging with businesses who are in the creative and social space. I've had several experiences of redundancy, as in somebody who's had to deliver it, as well as somebody that's been on the other side supporting people who have been delivering it. And it's always a topic that brings up several conflicts within you, I think, as a leader. And I just wanted to kind of chat a bit about that today and explore some of those things, because I think one of the key things that we need to do more of is be open and upfront about how uncomfortable certain scenarios make you feel. And I'm not, there might be plenty of people who know me, might know me quite well. I'm not somebody who shies away from making decisions. And I've deliberately not used the word difficult decisions. I'm not somebody that shies away from decisions, because I feel really strongly that when you're in a leadership position, you have to be the person with the broad shoulders that can look across the piece and say, right, what is the information telling me? What have I thought of everything? Have the people around me thought of everything? Are we looking at this in the right way? And I think when you sort of think and act in that way, when it comes to dealing with something that is really challenging, like making redundancy decisions, or even get to the point where you're considering redundancy decisions, you have to make sure that you've looked at all of the options. And I don't believe, certainly in the leadership arenas that I'm privileged to live and work in, I don't believe people take those decisions lightly. There's been when I've been prepping for this, there's lots of things I go, oh, I should say that, and then I'm like, oh no, I can't say that. It's like, oh, I should say this, and I'm like, oh no, I can't say that. And it's really difficult to try and get to the point where this is useful information. So a couple of things that really affect me if I've been in this scenario. One, I acknowledge my own vulnerabilities behind closed doors. So I definitely don't take things home, but I definitely do have peer support and other leaders around me where I can just go and say, this is what I need to do. And it's almost like, blah, oh my gosh, I have to get it out there. Because when you're in a scenario with colleagues and staff members, you are the leader and people have to rely on you. And you have to have that level of authenticity and integrity that isn't about you. I don't want to say, it's really difficult to choose the words, and I'm hoping that Charley will have all these beautiful words as we go through this, but it's very difficult not to let your own emotions carry away with you. You know, you've got to be clear, you've got to be honest, you've got to be concise, and you've got to deliver certain messages in key ways that allows that staff member or colleague to feel that the way that they feel. The most important thing for me is always trying to be as human as possible, but caveat that with, you've had really sound legal advice, you've had really great HR support advice, caveated with, this is the way I have to behave, and I have to allow that person to behave in the way that they behave. And that means when you go back to your colleagues and your peers, you can be really vulnerable. And I'm not a crier. I mean, I'll cry at, you know, movies. I'm not a crier in my job, but absolutely feel that every time I've had to do it, and it's not a pleasant experience. The other thing I wanted to bring up, so that's about my own vulnerability. I acknowledge my own vulnerability in that. The other thing I want to bring up is that I acknowledge being uncomfortable, and I acknowledge being uncomfortable in a way that I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. So we were talking earlier, I eat dreadfully when I'm in a stressful situation, no matter what the stressful situation, and I don't say this often, like, I have a big issue with weight, that's a whole other webinar, but I stress eat. So I will know as soon as I'm starting to hit a difficult scenario that I'm going to stress eat. And as I've gone through my career, I've just acknowledged that that's going to happen, and I don't beat my other life up about it, and I don't get myself into a difficult situation, but I acknowledge that I'm uncomfortable and I manage it. So rather than walking away and saying, I don't want to feel like that, I acknowledge that this is a really difficult situation and I should feel anxiety or stress. It's all about how I manage that anxiety or stress that's the key. And I've done that really well sometimes, and other times I've done that appallingly bad. And that then doesn't make me feel good. And you just end up in this sort of vicious circle of, I'm rubbish at everything, and look at what we're doing. And the third thing, and probably the most important thing, is that not everyone, when you're making decisions like that, not everyone can see the way forward like you can, because you're the person that has to see that way forward as the leader. So you have to acknowledge and be the person that they need you to be. So whenever I'm in a scenario, if I'm having to deliver a difficult message, I have to be robust and incredibly serious and incredibly genuine. And every time I've been in a situation like that, I have absolutely turned over every single option several times. And the other thing that I've absolutely make sure that and I would hope what I have done, and of course you never know, but I hope that I have done, is I have given people the opportunity to leave well when they have left. When you're faced with scenarios that are difficult, like redundancies, there's no fault or blame. There are scenarios you deal with. Yes, decisions are made. Could have been better, could have been different. But there are decisions that are made that were made in the best intended ways. And I think you need to give people as much positivity going forward as possible. I read somewhere the other day when I was thinking about this, and I actually regret, I've never done this, and I regret this, and hopefully I will never have to implement it. But if I do implement it, if I do have to be in this situation, I will do it again. I was reading that somebody who had to, because of the COVID situation, make 6 people redundant. And it was a very difficult scenario. But the leader, who was also delivering the message, went out deliberately to find other options for the staff members that were being made redundant. And I have been in scenarios where incredibly talented people have had to leave an organisation because of the circumstance, funding or otherwise. And I hadn't been in the position to do that, and I regret that. Actually, that would have been a good and right thing to do, because this is about people, it's about their talent, it's not, and it's about the scenario that they're in. It's not about their deliverability in that role. So if I hopefully I will never be in the position where I'm considering difficult decisions, but if I am, that's something I will take away with me as an action. I think one of the key things that is really challenging when you're in a situation as well like this is you've got the people that you're working with who are exiting the organisation, but you've also got the people that are staying. And that is incredibly stressful because there's mixed emotions going on there too. And some people can be really behind the new plans that you have to implement, and some people not so much. And as a leader, it's almost, in scenarios like this, you don't often get breathing space. It's like a marathon. And you have to be very honest with yourself about how far and how more you can push it, because you can't go, oh, I've dealt with this situation, and then you haven't. You're in another situation that needs as much nourishment and as much support and as much development as possible. And it's usually in that situation when I've always relied on HR specialists as well to help get through that. The culture is affected, productivity is affected, and you're kind of having to boost things. And so I think that's really important. It's the actual difficult scenario that you're dealing with and the people that are exiting the business, but the people that are staying are going to be the people that realise the vision with you and for you, and the communities that you're working with. Certainly in my case, it's about communities and people. So we have to make that work, and that's tough. So that's my 3 things: vulnerabilities, acknowledging I'm uncomfortable, and being as human as I can be with a very clear and concise message.
And with that, in the clear and concise message, which all of that kind of rings true to me from my experience of having to do this, we're presenting the clear message to people that it's for the survival of the mission of the organisation. So you're mission driven, obviously, and that's kind of front and centre of the communications. That's an important message, a balance with, you make a really good point, people who remain within the business and then feeling like they're going to be part of a shared vision and something which is stable, because making redundancies and making restructures is something that can be unsettling. So that's something that you would obviously want to point out to people. Charley, I'll bring you in just now. We'll ask a few more questions as we go. Charley from Brave Your Day. It's like helpfully and kindly you've provided a handout which we've emailed some of the attendees before. Could you talk us through your tips on managing anxiety and some of the things that you put into your handout, please?
I certainly can, and I was, as Rachel, as you were beautifully honest about what your experience was, but also you were beautifully honest about your relationship with yourself. And that's ultimately what we do at Brave Your Day. We support people to, first of all, have a relationship with themselves, because ultimately you have to feel confident in stepping forward, as you said, in this kind of authentic self. And I'll talk a bit about that in a wee minute, but I scribbled down a couple of things as Rachel was talking, because they really resonated. If we think about, if we start at the beginning, and the whole concept of delivering this kind of news is about delivering what we feel is bad news. And it's a message that we are delivering that we know will have the capacity to completely disrupt and to have a huge impact on normal routine and also the lives and livelihoods of the people that we supposedly care for. And so what can happen is that we, as the messenger, can feel very reluctant, and that's where the anxiety starts to build in delivering this news. And Rachel, the first point that jumped out for me was this thing about the relationship that we also have with endings, and and our relationship with loss, and not being able to fix things, and living thinking now, the one thing that COVID has taught us is that the only certainty we have is that life is uncertain. And, you know, we're living with that all the time. So looking at the news and how we deliver this, we start to build in ourselves an anxious state. And that's the kind of pizza eating, you know, wine drinking, you know, de-stressors that we start to exhibit in our behaviour as well, in order to manage this, because it is uncomfortable. And we are also anticipating, because if you remember, and most people will know this, anxiety lives in the future. And, you know, sadly, we don't have crystal balls, but we end up trying to be almost like these fortune tellers about what's going to happen. So let's start with the causes of anxiety. What causes us to feel this state? Well, if we just remember that it's a human reaction, and it's absolutely normal. There's nothing weird about you if you're starting to feel anxious. It's completely unique to each individual, so we'll all experience it in different ways, depending on our upbringing, depending on, you know, the experiences that we've had. And remember as well that it's a hark back to our ancestors. It's the fight, flight, freeze scenario. Now, you know, we're not going to be walking down Glasgow, Sauchiehall Street and getting chased by a bear, but we will be feeling a lot of what our ancestors experienced, which is that danger is lurking and that we are starting to feel this anxiety. And, you know, we habitually then start to read those messages as danger, and even though there's not. And so we start building it up. And, you know, the way I would like to kind of promote it is just think of it as more like it's a false alarm going off inside of us, and that really it's a warning, and it's showing up in our bodies. But what happens is that we overthink it, and we think about what is, you know, we're running through all these different scenarios of what's going to be going on. But ultimately, it exhibits itself in our bodies. And, you know, we also need to remember that our brains are, oh my goodness, they're the most fertile places for our imagination and catastrophizing. And, oh, you know, we do also, at that point, we will be talking to ourselves in a particularly cruel way. We might be, you know, just really, really being quite negative in not just how we're speaking to ourselves, but also what we're imagining the future is to hold. So, you know, a lot of that is around what we're imagining the barriers to this communication for this bad news is. Because we will be thinking, oh my God, you know, I mean, Rachel, you spoke about this. I have this fear of also upsetting people, putting them in this horrible, horrible situation. Nobody wants to be doing that. The impact it has on people's livelihoods. All the news we're hearing at the moment is that everyone's going to have to try and get onto universal credit, even if they can, because there are no other jobs. You know, it's like it's a negative external world as well, and so that in itself can be building inside us, that idea of, oh my God, I'm ruining someone's life. And sometimes as well, also what we're doing in the kind of cruelty that we show to ourselves is that we turn it inwards, and we actually then start thinking, oh my God, I'm really inadequate, or I'm a total failure, the fact that this has happened. I should never have got into this situation where I allowed this to build to this point where I'm having to let people go. So that's a huge thing, and the idea that we're also a barrier for communication can also be that idea that we are absolutely ditching people's hope and optimism for the future, and we also may feel ill prepared for managing other people's emotional response to this. Because how do we know? We don't know if someone's going to burst into tears. We don't know if someone's going to throw a chair at us. We don't know if someone's going to storm out. You know, we're building all this in our heads. So no wonder we end up in absolute state, you know, and stressed and distressed with the anxiousness of building up day on day before we start delivering this news. So, you know, the idea, just remembering, anxiety is really, really uncomfortable, but it isn't dangerous. It's not going to kill you, and it isn't life-threatening, but it does show up in our bodies in a particular way. So let's just quickly recap on what that might be. So remembering that when we experience it, we're wanting to escape, we want to avoid it, we want to get out the way, we just want it to go away because it feels so horrible and uncomfortable. But you know, everyone who is watching this webinar will know when they feel anxious what those things are that they do or experience in their body that is particular to them. So the types of things I've got here are, you know, you might grind your teeth at night. You might be really restless and unable to sit still. You might have a faster heartbeat. You might be needing the toilet more. You might feel like your stomach's churning, or that you're feeling dizzy, or you're kind of sweating, or you've got flushes, whatever. And the effects on our mind that are coupled with that are that those things I spoke about, we internalize negatively about ourselves. We feel tense, we feel anxious, we feel nervous. We have that sense of impending doom. You know, it's almost like, oh my God, I've just got this sense that something bad's going to happen. And we're unable to relax. And it's almost like, one way I could describe it that I've experienced, it's almost like the world is speeding up, but I'm slowing down. And can't stop worrying, and just feeling that sometimes what we do is we will default to our stress ways of coping. So Rachel, you said it beautifully, you know, you reach for the pizza and do those things. And these are the types of things that we do, and the way it shows up in us when we're feeling anxious. So we need to remember that anxiety is never a good decision maker, never ever. It's far too inflexible, and it's very, very conditional. And it actually just gets in the way of what you spoke about, Rachel, which is being authentic. Because when we're extra nervous, you know, it really interferes with the way that we're able to communicate with each other. And we've got those mind games going on inside of us. And I think sometimes what can happen, and I think about some of the clients I've had who have spoken about almost the fear of being authentic, means that might actually backfire, and that they, you know, if they're kind of admitting their flaws or their shortcomings or acknowledging their fear, they might just be, people will be like not respecting them or think they're really weak. But I think that if you've got boundaries set up within your authentic self, how you're stepping forward. And like what you said, you have particular people that you go to. You also know who you can trust in your circle to offload, dump your baggage, all those things. That's about setting up and creating that boundary, so as you can go back out there and be who you are on the inside out. And
I think the other thing, Charlie, just picking up on that, it's really interesting, is that anxiety is not a very good listener.
No.
So if you're in a scenario where you're delivering message and it's a very difficult message, and you feel that anxiety taking over, you only hear certain bits.
Yes.
And when you're sitting in front of somebody and your job is to deliver a particular message and engage with that person, and okay, so what are we going to do now? How are we going to consult going forward? You have to listen to everything.
Yes.
And you have to be able to listen to everything, rather than only hearing the bits that you can hear. And some of the organisations, businesses and leaders that I've worked with over the years who have done that perhaps not as well, have then found it really difficult, because what the person said and what they heard were two completely different things.
Yes.
And that is really, I think that is really important, because you need to be able to set expectations for yourself in a scenario like that, and for your colleagues and for your team. Everybody needs to know clearly what's going on, and what as you say, absolutely what those boundaries are. Because if you can't listen authentically, then it's not going to be a good, these things are not good is not a good, not good is not the right word, but they're not going to be as positive as they could be.
Yeah.
Because they are difficult. They're shitty.
Yeah. And you know what I hear is I mean, let's be honest about this. A lot of this is trial and error. This is almost like being in the gym or getting a new guitar or, you know, learning to ride a bike. We have to keep practicing, and we have to keep practicing in order to learn more. That's all we're ever doing. All we ever do as human beings is it's about what we are learning about the situation that we're finding ourselves in. And if we can start having a better relationship with ourselves and a closer relationship with ourselves to understand how anxiety shows up in us when we are trying to be the best leader that we can, then that for me is just a tremendous rich place to be, because what we'll start understanding more, and I think I put some of this in the handout that I gave out, which is that if we start to have a more honest relationship with ourselves, then we can be thinking on a scale of 1 to 5, you know, what is my relationship with myself? It's a question we ask a lot of times when we run workshops, and we are always astounded by how difficult people find that to answer. But ultimately, as you said, if we are then wanting to be the best that we can be, the most human that we can be, the most truthful and most congruent of who we are, and we're not actually straitjacketing ourselves to conform to this perception of what a leader should be. We are showing up as we are normally behind closed doors. We are showing up as what we believe in, the values that we hold, the belief in people, and all the things that we know is the absolute jewel in the crown of third sector. And we are being true to ourselves. We actually do then have the power to actually influence a person's experience, because we're managing ourselves better, and we're actually demonstrating authentic empathy. Yeah. And I think about that quite a lot. And I was thinking about a scenario where, you know, we often, you know, you think about someone, you know, is drowning, and, you know, somebody jumps in to save them. You know, in a therapeutic relationship, we wouldn't look to jump in with that person. We would look to put a hand out, we would look to be there on the side of the bank and to pull them in, but we wouldn't look to get drenched and down in the water with them. And that also is about setting a boundary and about a recognition that you're alongside, you're showing that you're alongside, that you're trying to understand, to empathize with this. A few years ago, I was in a situation where I was surrounded by people who had been in really top HR positions, and they had decided that they wanted to, you know, kind of reevaluate where they were at. And the reason for that was that they said every Christmas they could never ever relax, because they knew that when it came to January, they would have to start, you know, serving notice on people and having these individual conversations or these mass, you know, collective bargaining situations. And they said that they also started to realize, when's it going to be me? And that was where the empathy started coming in. And they then started to think, this isn't what I believe in, and this isn't actually what I want to be doing anymore. So, I mean, that's just a sideline. But I also think that the empathy part does come in, especially at the moment where people are receiving the bad news on Zoom or Skype. And so the ability and the distance that is created on technology means that we don't have that, we're not able to read and be open on all frequencies, just the kind of human emotion that we're getting, which means that we actually need to pay closer attention to what we're seeing, you know, and how, and the body language, and, you know, whether people have switched off or they're looking teary or they look like they're going to punch the screen. You know, it's like, and for me, you know, in the practice that I run, it's about articulating what's going on. So it might be about actually saying, you look, at the moment, you look like you're going to blow a gasket. What's happening? What's going through your head? You know, and to have those kind of, that takes bravery. And if you're feeling anxious, and that's one of the reasons why I'm saying, you know, it's about how we keep this in check. Another way is to, and I mentioned this before, is, and people will see this in the handout, but it is about breaking that cycle. It is about the practice and the practice and the practice. Let's be honest, this is a lifelong practice. You know, we all need to do it. I do it every day. I do it every hour. Sometimes I've got to do it bloody minute to minute. It's about noticing how you're talking to yourself. It's about how you're overthinking, you're overanalyzing, you're criticizing yourself before you even get out to do the difficult thing. So it is about, as you said, getting support, because what that in itself is, you know, about creating a more radical practice for yourself of how you can be kinder and more compassionate to yourself. You're going to do something that is very, very difficult. Not everyone could do it, and you're going to do it to the best of your ability. And it's like actually creating a different language for yourself, and just trying to swap that. The other thing that I think is really interesting is this concept of befriending your anxiety, and just thinking about the fact that try and embrace it, give it a wee hug, you know. Think of your emotions as a rainbow, you know. They are a full bandwidth, and they are at all different tempos. And as human beings, we know that when we get up in the morning, how we feel in the morning can be different to how we feel at lunchtime, to how we'll feel tonight. So it is about building up your learning as well around, I mean, really it is your emotional intelligence, you know, what you know about your own emotions and your own trigger points. So it is about, think of your emotions as allies rather than enemies, and think of that anxiety as that alarm that's letting you know that you're uncomfortable. And as Rachael said, that's something to absolutely salute, because you then are in a place of bravery. You are facing something you are very, very afraid of, but you are going ahead with it anyway. And bravery, the backbone to, you know, vulnerability and our sense of fear is the backbone to bravery. So, you know, it is about looking at that. And the self-management, Rachael, you spoke about that. It is about working out how we de-stress, how we get in check with our own breathing. You know, people will know what works for them. Is it going for a run? Is it, you know, I don't know, doing your garden? Is it, you know, there's things that people do to manage themselves in between as they're preparing for something. But I thought that what you said about the preparing for actually speaking the words is really important. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I have had many a kind of bad news delivered to me where people just blooming well padded out the thing, and they went all round the houses, and I just wanted them to get on and tell me whatever the bad news was. I knew I could sense it off them. So it's like, cut that out. In coaching, we would call it bottom lining. You know, it's just like bottom line it, get to the bottom line. Tell people, and then you can start having a conversation, as you said, about optimism, about where next, about, you know, how you're going to progress this.
I do practice all of those. I do. I would never. This is big secret stuff. So we're in a closed group, right? Feeling brave here. I'm feeling brave. I practice all of those conversations in the mirror.
Yeah. Good.
And I edit and I readjust and I edit and I readjust, and I think, how am I trying to, and that's with any challenging conversation that I have to have. Am I actually living up to, values are hugely important to me. I consider myself a very value-led person, and I can handle anything, but the kryptonite for me is if people challenge my integrity. That's where the mist comes in, and I find it difficult. So I have to practice those. I do, and I have to practice those conversations, because if people get a different version of what I say I am in a tough situation, that's everything's gone kablamo. I can't get the culture of anything back. I can't get the delivery of what we're trying to achieve back. And that's really difficult when you're in a mission-led scenario.
Yes.
Because if people are then saying, well, but I'm here for the clients and I'm here for this and I'm here for that, you're not staying true to those values. You have to be really clear and genuine and concise as to why this decision has been made at this time in this scenario. And like many people, I've got that really badly wrong and I've got it really brilliantly right. But I take the time to prepare. And I also, like, I equate it like, so I'm an opera singer by trade, if that's even a thing. And so I should know when my breathing's dodgy. I should know when my voice is going to crack. I should know how to manage my emotions around singing. So I treat it like almost like a well-rehearsed performance in all of those right ways, not in an egotistical way at all, but in the right ways to say, actually, is this how I would want this message delivered to me? Yes or no? And if the answer is no, then I have to go away and practice. And often you're in scenarios where the decision can be made pretty quickly, especially in today's environment. There's going to be people that are going to have to make decisions. Probably people now that know furlough is just eking out a decision that is coming. What are we going to do about that? And how are we going to get ourselves together? And so you can find yourself very fast in a scenario that you feel really uncomfortable with, and like, have I thought this through well enough? Have I got enough advice on this? Am I delivering this correctly? You know, are we communicating properly? Are the letters correct? Is my delivery correct? Is the content correct? Are we doing everything we can? And sometimes people mix up the fact that there's absolute legal responsibilities and there's ways that these things have to be done. The I's and the dots have to be crossed at the same time as you can't hide behind that. You have to be upfront at the same time with that, and so that you're doing the process correctly, but also you're being the leader correctly. And that's really difficult. Now, I've been in scenarios where people have hidden behind either or, and it just makes you feel like it's horrid.
Yeah.
And you've got to remember, people are moving on with their lives. As soon as they've left you, they've got other people to impress and other things to do. They've got hopes and dreams that they want to do. And that's where I really regret not moving forward in some of those ways that I perhaps could have done. But actually, you need them to have the confidence to go out and realise their best version of themselves as well. Because it's just a circumstance. It's really tricky.
And sorry, Kieran, but the final bit then for me of this kind of human kind of therapeutic jigsaw puzzle is the debrief, you know, and what goes on with that. And I look at that from both perspectives. I look at that from, I mean, at the moment I work with people who have been or are facing redundancy, and they are now looking at, you know, what their future pathway is going to be, but they are also dealing with the emotions that they've got as a result of the news. And, you know, I think about, you know, the fact that in terms of debrief, if we think about nurses and doctors, they often are the ones that are delivering really, really life-threatening news to us. Many years ago, my previous partner, who has since died, was delivered the news that he had terminal cancer on Christmas Eve, in the middle of the nurses' party, and at the old Victoria Infirmary, I know. And was basically told, I don't know what you want to do. You can either, you know, stay here or you can go up the road. And, you know, it's always stayed with me, that sense of how we deliver news and how we deliver news in a way that, you know, can you imagine, you know, you're cast out into, you know, Christmas time when everything shuts down and you've got that news. But the reason that I mention the thing about doctors and nurses isn't to kind of slag them off, but is ultimately to remember, I mean, the Royal College of Nursing has a phrase which is called reviving the messenger. And that ultimately is something, when we I was on the team that set up Childline in Scotland, and that's exactly what we used to do. We used to have a debrief after every single shift, and ultimately it was to culturally normalise talking about what the experience has been when you have been delivering or hearing things, that two-way conversation that is uncomfortable and challenging, and about thinking about, it as a healthy mechanism to actually, break down chronologically what you have been learning and noticing about yourself, as well as, what you're noticing about the other person. And also working out, how you feel about it, but like what you said, Rachel, what you would do differently, your regrets, your things, also we're not good at celebrating the things that we actually did quite well. And it's about also saying, well, actually, I think I did this bit quite well, and they seem to respond to this. And so I think that's good. For me, it's a place to kind of dump that baggage. And I do think that's hugely important. And if you're a tiny setup, and it is like a kind of family, then, you might, I just say to you, and this isn't about a kind of advert for me, but it's like, invest in getting external support with this, because it is something that people can carry with them, and it can also impact on our performance through time. So really,
that's a really important point, though, Charlie. Extending your professional network and having people around you that may also understand the enormities of the decision-making process and understand the pros and cons of what you have to decide, because you can't take this stuff home.
Yeah,
and you can't offload on partners and family members, because remember, when you talk in this way, remember, people always have an opinion, and if you're involved in a certain difficult scenario, you need to bounce that off with either other colleagues or leaders who have a similar roller coaster experience than you, or can empathise with having to make a very difficult decision for the good of the mission of an organisation. And because that's always the bit that people find really difficult. If you're a mission-led business, why are you making redundancies?
Yes.
That's a really key message that everybody finds difficult. And I think that you have to really make sure that the message is value-led, clear and concise, and is completely in line with the ethos of the organisation, not within the interpretation of an ethos of the organisation, which can often be difficult and tricky. And you just got to let that play out. But you need to invest in your professional network and have people around you that you can trust, that will understand challenging scenarios.
So it's about creating that safety for yourself. And I love what you say about, keeping your eye on that mission, because ultimately, in coaching, we would call that keeping your eye on the prize. It's about adapting with that, keeping that flexible, but about ultimately not being derailed by negativity or other kind of ways that we can trip ourselves up. So it's about constantly thinking, why am I doing this? Why is it this path and not that path? And it's about keeping your eye on that. I mean, I think there's been a lot in there, and there's a lot for people to digest, I dare say, but it is just to sum up that it is just about remembering, completely human to be feeling like this. It's a human reaction and an instinct, and just embrace it as an alarm that is going off. And remember, as Rachel's talked about, it is about advanced preparation. And the third thing, about creating that support for yourself. So
Rachel's just pointed out that if you're listening, you can ask questions as we go on. We're kind of wrapping up at the moment, so there is some time. Just a kind of final point on some of those points there. So there is a timeline, obviously, that people go through from making the decision, from the kind of board level of looking at finances, looking at the options. As a leader, you will probably process that information. You will well in advance of you delivering that message to staff. So there is something there about you having more time about processing what's going to happen and not taking that for granted that you've had more time when you're delivering that message, because people are actually just hearing that for the first time.
Yeah.
And also, I kind of point on that you made, Rachel, on crossing the T's and dotting the I's. It is a process you're going through with people, but it shouldn't be a fait accompli when you go to the consultancy stage. But in many cases, like you said, the actual decision might be quite clear cut. And similarly, you don't want to give people false hope.
Yeah,
For what
no, absolutely. And I think that, you know, I've always entered into consultations genuinely, like, is there something else we can think of? All options are genuinely always on the table, and you know that you've probably got several scenarios in your mind around this is the way it could go, but all options are on the table. And there's been several times where people have come back with something that you go, oh yeah, that actually, do you know what, that could work. I can't believe I didn't think about that. Or there's been scenarios where you just think, this isn't, these options are not, we've not got enough time, or we just can't realise them quick enough, or that's going to require a different tack, and I'm not sure that sits with the ethos or the vision of and the mission of the organisation. But I think when you're in scenarios and you go, you know, you're in a process, you're in a consultative process, you have to be genuine about that. It's not it's absolutely not appropriate not to be. And I think there are some, you know, certainly organisations that have come back, and people have come back to us and asked for support around areas where that's not felt as genuine as it could be. And that's really, I think people need to be aware that you're a mission-led, values-driven business. That is every single part of your business. It's not just the good bits that everybody likes. It actually matters more when it's the tough bits. Yeah. And if it's the difficult decisions that need to be made, and people that do that irresponsibly really irritates me. But actually, that's it's true. When the going gets tough, you have to live your values harder and stronger and more visible than any time before. Because I've been in lots of scenarios where people absolutely don't like me. They absolutely don't like me. But they've come out the door and they've thought, right, okay. And there's maybe some respect there. And I'll take that all day long, because as long as the process is correct, the engagement has been valuable, it's been a human interaction that's difficult, but the values have come really thick and fast and strong through the whole process, then you can go on and build what you need to build. It's not the end. And also remember, the other thing is, if you're on the receiving end of that it's not about you. Mm-hmm. And that's really important to, and that's not a trite thing to say around, it's not you, it's me when you're having a breakup. It's actually a really genuine thing about, this is a process we're in. This is the scenario we're in. Because that person has to then find confidence and be believing in themselves to go and contribute elsewhere if that's what they want to, or set up on their own if that's what they want to. But you need to leave that person, I really strongly believe, with the sense that they can go and do anything. And that's important to do that. But that then, huge pressure on you as leadership. And that's where your professional network has to come into play. Where you can bounce that off, because you will have imposter syndrome. I have that every day. Every day, I'm not good enough to deliver any of this stuff. And it's really vital that you have your network around you to support you to do that.
That's a really important point. Thank you, both of you, for your support with this session today. I found it really enlightening. I would urge anyone who is thinking about restructures and redundancies to have a look at our webinar from Morton Fraser this morning. If you didn't have a chance to get that, it'll be on our website. And we're also working with partner social shifters who will be using some of the content to turn into our digital learning product. So just want to say thank you very much. As always, Rachel, thank you. And Charlie, thanks so much for your time today. And I hope to be working with you and speaking to you very soon.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.